All right. What is up, y'all? Will here with Schedulefly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, one of our special in-studio editions here at Everybody Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. Restaurant Owners Uncorked, episode 660-something now. We've been doing it for 16 years, and we've been proud to sponsor it at Schedulefly. Schedulefly is simple, web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. Like, you get a human on the phone that will help you patiently. In fact, a lot of times you'll get me on my flip phone, and that number's on our website, by the way. So we value simple, easy software. We value legendary customer service. And I'm not saying we'll never raise our prices, but 19 years we never have, so very affordable. So two things, y'all. If you were on pencil and paper or Excel for your scheduling right now, and there's like 150 or 200,000 restaurants out there still doing it, it's not free. I call it the chaos tax. You got labor leakage, labor costs that you can tighten up. You got managers that are spending a lot of time dealing with the schedule and scheduling changes that need to be out there on the floor or with your guest, or having more time with their family, not sitting around Sunday evening for 3 hours doing a schedule. And then you've got meeting the employees where they are. They want their phones on their app. Toast tells us that the number one reason that employees leave restaurant jobs now is scheduling flexibility. So we have a 30-day free trial, schedulefly.com. Sign up for it. No credit card required, no BS, no hassles. Give it a shot. Call us if you need us. We're happy to help. If you're on another scheduling software, a lot of good companies out there. A lot of them are backed by a lot of money, and they keep having to jack up their fees to continue to grow. You might be paying a whole lot of money for scheduling software that we do just the exact same thing for half of what you're paying. So schedulefly.com, give us a shout. My number's there. Call me anytime. Happy to talk about it. Thank you all. Now, let's get into this episode of Restaurant Owners Uncorked, all the way from Arizona. My new close friend, Lance. Lance, introduce yourself.
Lance Reynolds, lancereynolds.com. I'm grateful for this partnership and was so excited that you would invite me to come out here. However, I did not know it was the 660 something podcast.
Yeah.
And I'd like to clarify which something that is, because, I don't want to be the podcast of the beast and, ended up with the 666. We got to skip one or move somebody into this one. Like 667 would be great.
I think you're 668. We actually did 666 recently, and it was really odd for me. I was like, is there a way to not have that number when it tracks
skip.
it? Yeah.
Just skip one. No, I'm very grateful to be here. I've spent 30 years in the restaurant industry as a restaurant owner and operator, and rode the roller coaster, which it is. This industry is insane. It's a roller coaster, and I'm grateful for all of it. And, I'm sure we're going to get into it. This industry has a lot of peril, and it took me a minute to figure it out and to figure out how to do it right so that you can actually make money. And it's a lot more fun when you're making money, and it's no fun at all when you're not. And, we learn through doing things the hard way generally, and hopefully now there's more information out, and there's more support and guidance from people in the industry that have been doing it a long time, that have fallen down and bumped their knee enough to where we can help operators not necessarily have to fail to get to the success part.
Man, so many things to unpack here. Well, as I told you, the one question I ask everybody is, how and when did you initially get started in restaurants?
So, true story. Had no intent of being in the restaurant industry, right? I had, goals and dreams and things I wanted to do. I just moved to Flagstaff, Arizona, which is where I still make my home. And the only job I could get was as a janitor cleaning a restaurant from 10 to 2, 6 nights a week. And so I took it. And I actually ended up really, really loving that job. It was good for my school life as well, because I couldn't go out and party with my friends because I had to work during the party hours. But I had a break, and I was a huge punk rock fan, and there was this new artist on the scene, Joan Jett. Joan Jett was playing in Phoenix. I talked a buddy of mine into driving down the valley to see Joan Jett play. And at some point from like the first chord to the encore, true story, I made the decision I'm going to be Joan Jett's boyfriend. I was just so convinced that like, that's my girl, future ex-wife right there on stage. And so I called my boss the next day. I said, hey, I'm going to need some time off. I'm going to follow Joan Jett up the California coast. We're going to go to San Diego. I need a week off. And he wasn't okay with that, but I went anyway and he fired me. And about 3 shows in, got an opportunity to actually go backstage to meet Joan Jett. And I'm thinking it's divine, right? Like this is my chance. And I'm seeing my future play out in front of me. And I choked, just completely choked. I don't know what I said, but it was, stupid and adorable enough for her to give me a pat on the shoulder and walk away. So, that dream died. And when I went home, I didn't have a job. And the only job I could get was working in a restaurant. And, I took it and I loved the money at first. And then eventually I just really fell in love with the industry and really committed myself to it. So much so I dropped out of college and really decided to make a go of it. And, so 2 things. Number one, I owe all of my success in this industry to being rejected by Joan Jett. And number 2, I was so committed to it, I ended up owning that restaurant that I was a janitor in 5 years later. And that was all just drive and love for this industry. And it came full circle. And then in 2022, business partners and I in Flagstaff ended up getting that same space and opening up a fine dining Italian restaurant called Teatro in Flagstaff, in that same exact space that, I started my career. My daughters learned how to walk in that restaurant. So just, coming full circle.
We'll talk about your books here in a minute, but there's the idea of manifesting, and you had that moment where you're like, okay, I'm going to have a relationship with Joan Jett.
Yeah, I was convinced.
You got pretty darn close. Somehow you got backstage.
Yes.
That's pretty impressive. Sometimes do you feel like we think we know what we want to manifest, but we need to realize that was the wrong path to find the right path?
Yeah, man. I you and I have had a lot of conversations about this recently. I don't feel like there are any accidents, and you end up on a path.
Yeah.
It's generally not the path where you think it's going to end up, but you end up on that path so that you can, people, circumstances, and events, like those are the things that really change lives are when you meet the right people. You end up in circumstances that, you have no business being in those circumstances, or events take place in your life that may feel catastrophic or tragic at the time, but they end up being exactly what you needed, a lesson that you needed to learn, or someone you needed to meet along the way. And, it's hard to embrace those things because we try to control it all. But generally our destiny is outside of our ability to control all of it. We still need to work hard. We still need to have a good attitude. We still need to treat people well. There's a lot of things that we can control in that process, but the outcome is sometimes literally none of our business. You know what I mean? We just need to stay true to, what we desire, and stay true to ourselves. And when we're genuine and authentic, the people, circumstances, and events are going to appear to help us get where we're supposed to be. So
you go back to working in this restaurant, and within 5 years you owned it. So I don't know if I've told you this. I've mentioned this on this podcast, but in 2010, when I started this, my thought was, I'm going to learn from like all these successful restaurant owners what it takes to be successful as a restaurant owner. And then I'm going to have my own restaurant one day. It's going to be called Ribs and Whiskey. Like I had it, I knew what I wanted to do. I liked ribs. I liked whiskey. There's a Widespread Panic song called Ribs and Whiskey. I was like, we're going to play that at the close of every night when we're clean. But then the reality sunk in pretty fast, listening to successful owners that had done it and been around the block, more than a minute. And I went, okay, I don't have that. That's this is a much harder industry than I had anticipated. Way harder. I mean, you have the idealistic view of the owner coming in and shaking hands and buying people drinks and sitting at the end of the bar, and you're like, what a sexy, cool thing. Like, that's the public perception of like what it is to own your own restaurant, and you're just kind of rolling in cash and all this kind of stuff. And that is so incredibly far from the reality. That's the, like, I think Scott Maitland told me one time at Top of the Hill up in Chapel Hill, he said, like, that's, 0.1% of my time is doing that.
Yeah.
I realized really quickly it was very challenging. I also realized, while I don't think I have it in me, I know I don't have it in me, I have a lot of, maybe respect people like you that have something in your wiring that enables you to go, every single day we're going to face all these challenges and all these hurdles, and we're trying to do this like performance every day and get it like, and just nail it. But every day, like, this little thing will go wrong or that, but that's okay. We're going to regroup, we're going to learn, we're going to get better, and we're just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. And it's a weird thing, because if you want to control things, don't do this, because it's like there's so much you just can't control, and you just have to kind of roll with it. So it's why we're episode 668 and 16 years of doing this, is I've never stopped enjoying learning from people like you and leveraging what you've learned to do what we set out to initially, which is to inspire and educate restaurant owners, because it's hard and it's a grind. And people listen to this and they tell me sometimes it's like therapy, because they feel like, particularly as an independent restaurant owner, sometimes you feel like, am I the only one dealing with all this stuff? Like,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I tip my hat for being able to do that. But what is it? Like, when was the moment? I mean, you even liked doing the job as a janitor. Like, what was it about the restaurant world that you said, man, this is me?
It was a lot of, the 1/10 of 1% that we're talking about. The social interaction is so amazing in restaurants. Just working in restaurants as a bartender or a server, you hear, it's like a family. It truly does become your family, and that can be good and bad, right? There are a lot of positives coming out of that. There's a lot of negative behavior and bad habits that come out of that. Drug and alcohol misuse in the restaurant industry is extremely high. And restaurant workers suffer because of a lot of that. And it puts a lot of burden on the owner to kind of care for them. But I think, watching a couple of people that I really loved and respected doing it well, and admiring their approach to, how they did it, and just, an overwhelming and irrational love of food and people really drove me, to get into it without truly the training or business acumen that I needed to be successful.
Yeah.
But I did it anyway, the things that we're willing to try when we're young and ambitious and foolish and, all the things.
Yeah.
And I did. And I really truly thought I was going to marry Joan Jett, right? Like, based on, so I had that, like, I can literally do anything. And what do I want to do? And I'd never really loved anything as much as I loved just being in restaurants and being around people and hearing, their responses to, their experience or the food or the staff or the cocktail that, really did something special for them. And people coming in and celebrating special occasions in your restaurant, there are fewer things that feel that good. I think where this all shifted for me pretty heavily was when, the reality, all of that wears off when there's no money in the bank. And when this really started to shift for me, and, the really profound moments in my career, the most profound moments in my career that, I have really, I started a school. The first time I sold my restaurants, I started a school called Food Biz Today to teach restaurants how to make money. And I did that primarily because everything that I had learned, I learned the hard way. None of it was intuitive. through pain and failure, I was forced to become a better business person and a better leader. And, I had to learn things that I was not good at, I was not comfortable with. But once I did that, once I really started to understand some of those things, I started to really like those things also. And so I'm fortunate in that. But, there was a time where we just opened our 4th restaurant. We were on the verge of losing literally everything. I left the friends and family gathering for the 4th restaurant, days before we're getting ready to open. Arrived late, left early, went home, put my book bag down, walked into my daughter's bedroom. Madison was 1 in her little in princess crib, and Hannah was just turned 3 in her little princess bed, and I just watched them sleep and just started to cry because I was, we were this far away from losing everything, losing our house, losing our cars, moving in with our in-laws, losing all the restaurants. 177 employees would have all been out of work. And it was literally in that moment, watching my daughters sleep while I was just, losing it, that I made a decision that I knew what I was doing was not going to get us there. But I also knew what I needed to do to get there to a certain extent that I wasn't doing, because I didn't know how, and I didn't want to raise my hand, and we didn't have a P&L, for example,
right,
which most restaurants don't. We didn't have a P&L. And I didn't know how to create a P&L, and I needed to raise my hand and start asking people, okay, hey, look, I don't know how to do this, 4 restaurants, they just figured I had, my act together and I knew what I was doing. And to be vulnerable and raise your hand and start asking for help changed everything. And through that process of asking enough people for help, we eventually turned that around. Those restaurants were very successful, and I was able to sell them and not have to do anything for a while. And that's when I started the school, to try to teach and educate and inspire people to think of their business differently.
How many years ago was this?
That was 25 years ago, 26 years ago.
26 years ago. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're a young dude. I hear a lot of times restaurant owners, it's almost like robbing from Peter to pay Paul. Yeah. Like, is that what was going on? Like, you were like, 100%. Well, if we start the 4th, like, and then you wind up with like, you're spread too thin and then none of them are making money and you can't. Yeah. Is that kind of where
That's exactly what happened. I mean, this location came up. It was perfect.
Yeah.
The perfect location for the concept that we wanted. But it was early and we knew that, young and dumb. The country was in a recession, coming out of a recession at that time. Banks weren't lending. So we're like, well, we'll grind it out. We've got money in savings. We'll pull money from these restaurants and we'll fund it, young and dumb. Signed a bad lease. Like, we just made so many mistakes in the building of that 4th restaurant. Now, thank goodness the concept was right and people loved it. And so, it was busy right away. That was very, very helpful. But there were so many other things that we had to do that if we hadn't, it would have failed no matter how busy it was. But yeah, that I look back on that time of my life really fondly because that shaped everything moving forward for me, in that I never lost the I can do anything, belief. But I also learned that you have to be prepared. You have to be educated. You have to understand, money. You have to understand numbers, how to manage all of that. And you also need to be, vulnerable and brave enough to just ask for help, and it's amazing how many people will help you if you just ask.
The challenge sometimes is, you're a restaurant owner. You've got 3. You've just opened your 4th. Everything looks great. This is like the Instagram stuff we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Oh, they're doing great. He's doing great. When nobody else knows what you know inside. And it's hard to be vulnerable in a moment like that. You have to let your ego down and be willing to admit, like, I don't know how to do this, or I need help with this. That's hard for a lot of people. Unfortunately, some people will ride that out until the failure happens.
Yeah.
I mean, you were close, right?
Very, very close. And I had the opportunity to ask for help many times along the way before I actually did.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the big lesson learned there. I think you're right, Will. Most people don't ask for help. They don't know how to ask for help. It's a blow to the ego. I mean, here's the thing that the restaurant owners that are listening to this today understand is that all of your friends and everyone in your community thinks you own a Brinks truck and you're shoveling cash into the back of it every night. And you have plenty of money. They're doing really, really well. And, nobody really truly understands that, like, month to month, depending on, it doesn't take a lot for a restaurant to end up in a lot of trouble. I share, and I've written a couple books that I brought today that I've shared with you. And a lot of it is that vulnerability. I tell a lot of stories in my books about, during this period of my career, these are the mistakes that I made and this is how it impacted me. But this is what I did to get out of it, So, the idea behind all of that is not that I know all of the answers or that my career, to your point about Instagram, kind of looks like they're doing so great. I don't ever share that story. I don't ever, give this linear timeline of my career that I started as a dishwasher and ended up as a successful restaurant owner, operator, and owning a successful school. It didn't look like that. It looked like this. You know what I mean? Still does. To this day, there's so many challenges in business, and I like to share those stories when I get up in front of people. I share a 13-minute version of my failure and on the very, very tip of that pin, and feeling like everything was going to collapse, but then turning it around one day after the other and focusing on the right things and how that impacted not just, the financial side of my career, but the wisdom side of my career. So that no matter what business I go into now, where I'm involved in other industries that have nothing to do with the restaurant industry right now, it all applies. All of those lessons and all of the things that I learned along the way, they all apply. They carry over into any industry. You have to understand human behavior. You have to understand people and the people that work for you. And you have to understand money and you have to understand math. And, there are just some foundational principles that translate to any industry. And so, when I look back on all of that, failure was failure, whether I lost it all and had to move in with my in-laws or not, like I was failing. I look back on all of that fondly and with gratitude. I really do feel thankful that I was able to get to that point and not lose everything, But even if I had, the lessons that I was learning, I would have bounced back, and I would have come through that because I was already in the middle of the transition, and the wisdom and education was coming hard and fast.
You've got a few books here, and I want you to talk about one of these here that you wrote as a Christmas gift for your family. But you talk in there about mindset, and you talk about what happens when you're in a state of fear and what happens when you're in a state of positivity and optimism and things like that. But talk a little bit about that, because if you had maybe not gotten the help you needed and the restaurants had failed and you had to move in with your family or whatever, I think you would have found your way. Yeah. Because of the power of the way you approach a situation and think about a situation. Tell me about that. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah. We were talking about this over lunch today. My father, he was such a good guy. He was, and he was, really good to me. And, as I've gotten older in life, I've realized like how lucky I was because, he was at his core, he was a good guy and he was kind to me and, he did things with me and spent time with me. And so, I realized just those things alone, I'm lucky because a lot of kids didn't have that growing up, but he was severely manic depressive. And, so he would be at extreme highs or extreme lows, and there was not a lot of normal in there. And, figuring that out, that my dad, suffered from depression was a transitional phase of my life. I was 10 when it wasn't just, dad has bad moods or good moods. I really came to understand that he was suffering, and I started armoring up. As a 10-year-old little kid, my mother used to, she's talked about this, through my entire life before she passed. And she used to say, like, you were just the weirdest little kid. You're getting up at, 6 a.m. and going for a run every day in the rain, in the weather. It didn't matter. Like, you were doing that every day. And she didn't understand that, I had heard someone say that when you run, you release endorphins into your brain that, can help with depression. And so for me, I was armoring up. I was just waiting for the day that, the monster that was haunting my father every day, eventually it would come for his only son. And I started listening to a dude named Earl Nightingale, who you're familiar with. Most people are not, but the dude literally has the voice of God, and he was kind of the pioneer of positive thinking and, and mindset. And I read Think and Grow Rich.
Napoleon
Hill.
Yeah.
As a young man, I'm like absorbing all of this information. And so, you're right. Because of that, I was able to really help conquer a lot of the, the mental health demons that are a part of me. It's just a part of my, genealogy, and I inherited a lot of that from my dad. But, I learned habits and behaviors around how to control my mindset, how to control my morning, how to control my night before I go to bed. Some of the habits and behaviors I learned as a little boy, which is very strange. I realize now, I've got daughters that are 32 and 30. I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and I, I look at them when they were growing up thinking, it was pretty weird that you were, doing that, but it helped me a lot, and it really has shaped a lot, and that a lot of that storytelling and that process entered into that, that book that I created for my family for Christmas, just as a Christmas gift for them. Had it printed at Kinko's and put it in a little leather case, and that I thought it was going to end there, but they eventually encouraged me to actually create an actual book and sell it.
What's it called, and where can we find it? Is it on Amazon?
It is. It's called M3, Becoming the Most Magnificent Me.
Okay.
And it's a lot about my journey. But then it's also, I started that book as a guided gratitude journal that would kind of guide because my children that's something I've been doing since literally the day after my father died. I've been writing in a gratitude journal, and people struggle with, what do I write about today? And so this was a guided gratitude journal that every day it would give you a tip, like, hey, write about this, here's some things you might want to consider. And they really loved it, and they used it. And the feedback that I got from them was, I want another one. Can you print another one for me when they would finish it? And so that really became the genesis of creating an actual book that I published, and it's available on Amazon, and I've given it to all of my friends. I mean, I brought a case of them with me on this trip to give away to, all the people that I'm going to be meeting with while I'm here. Because I think it's important.
So we can just look up Lance Reynolds, because you've got 3 books, right?
Yeah, Lance Reynolds books on Amazon, or go to lancereynolds.com. There are links to all of them on my website.
The ROI of giving a shit.
That's one.
It's not about the effing food. Let's talk about these.
So It's Not About the Effing Food was the first book that I wrote. It took me a long time. I have a co-author to that book. Christina Livers is my co-author and my business partner in another venture. And that was really, truly about, how difficult this business is. And, I'd started writing something, trying to put something together before COVID. But then through COVID is when, so much happened in this industry. Yeah. And people really became aware of, how important restaurants are to a community. Mm. And, so that's when I really got motivated. And in 2020, I started writing it and massaging it, and it was okay. And then I brought Christina in, and she helped me make it great. So that's really, truly about, food is important, but, farm to table restaurants with, highly skilled and highly trained chefs go out of business every day, because they don't have that other piece, those pieces that are missing around, making sure that you're, you have good business acumen, and you're automating when you can and utilizing technology as much as you possibly can. And then the ROI of giving shit came around, similar, past, like screwing it up, not treating people the way that, I was so driven by the numbers and so driven by the other things, and realizing through some other failures and challenges in my leadership that, when you treat people well and when you set high standards and you train and mentor people, they don't leave, and as I started doing research for that book, came across thousands of very, very successful businesses all around the world that, employees are their number one priority. And they also happen to be incredibly successful in their EBITDA and their stock price, and all of the other things fall in line. And primarily that's because, their employees don't leave. And so they save a lot of money there, but also the customers are responding to these people that have longevity within the heart and soul of that business, which, that's kind of a secret sauce. And we fail to recognize that sometimes as business owners and operators, that how we treat our people is going to extend all the way through to the bottom line.
Yeah, it's easy to get stuck in the numbers on the P&L. It's easy to get stuck in the numbers in the spreadsheet. I believe if you look at some of the most successful businesses in history, and this is, I guess, what you're talking about here, the businesses that I admire, the numbers and the financial success are the byproduct, not the main focus. That comes with that.
That's right.
But if you are locked in on, look, sorry, no offense, but I won't say all private equity, but like private equity is pretty well known for like coming in and taking a business, and a lot of times the wrong private equity can rip out the secret sauce because you can't measure that in a spreadsheet, and then all of a sudden the thing that made that business great evaporates and that business dies. That's the wrong focus. That's just a total focus on numbers. And I shouldn't say just private equity. That could be a business owner. It could be anybody. But I use that as an example of like where so many businesses become great because they are focused on the people that work there. They're focused on the guests that come in the door. The food, sure, you got to get the food right, but like, I showed you that video. I was with my buddy the other day, and we were down at Mary O'Neill's in Waxhaw, and that lady came up and saw my schedule fly hat. I was like, oh, schedule fly and all that stuff. But even if I didn't have that hat on, which I've been there plenty of times without it, and I don't like tell them they just treat me well.
Yeah.
Like the food's good. Yeah. But I'm not there for that. I want to have a good meal. I want to have a hearty meal, but it's like, my friend was like, you always talk about this place, we're going there, and I like, wow. I'm like, because just watch what happens when you walk in. Hostesses are there, smile, eye contact, they're present. Server comes up, eye contact, intentional, how you doing? They're not on a script, they're having fun, but they're also taking, the process seriously. They're checking in, they're engaged. The owner comes by, like that's a freaking awesome experience. Yeah,
man.
And especially in today's economy, when unfortunately for restaurants, costs have gone up so much. It's like, it's hard, especially when you're in that middle price range. Like if you're selling $125 steaks, you might be all right because you're selling to a clientele that's not really worried about money. But in this sort of like weird K-shaped economy, if you're in that middle band, like that experience better be really good, because people they're going out less. When they do go out, it's not just like the food's got to taste really good. It needs to be like, I really enjoyed being there and I felt welcomed and important.
Yeah, we experienced that today. We went to I'm not going to name names, but we went to. Well, I'm going to name the place we went to. We went to Laurel's Cafe,
Laurel Market,
Laurel Market, and like ironically, that's my little sister's name, and you just randomly picked that place. But right next to that is an internationally famous place to grab coffee. And we ended up going to Laurel Market and having, wonderful coffee, wonderful drinks, wonderful lunch. And the people there were so incredibly sincere that clearly you know them and they know you and there's a relationship built there, but they made me feel that way too. I got there a couple minutes before you and went in to get a juice. And just the way that the guy was talking to me, like they're busy, so he's clearly in a hurry, but he like stopped and engaged with me and we had a full-blown conversation. And I think that there's a trend away from chains, and chains do a great job. I'm not bagging on chains. There are a lot of chain restaurants that do a fantastic job, but there's a trend away from chain restaurants where people are really focused on, something local, where they know the people that own the place. They understand that there's not a safety net, behind that mom and pop restaurant that there may be with a chain restaurant, that there certainly is. And I love that. I love seeing people, being a little more thoughtful and conscientious around where they're going to eat and voting with their dollars, because it matters. We saw this during COVID. The team that I was managing at that time, we had 80 consultants and dropped down to 12 overnight. And the research that we were doing around the impact of restaurant closures, because the restaurants, without, some of the government assistance, they would have collapsed for sure. And, when if restaurants disappeared from your local community today, your community's economic structure would collapse within a month or two. I mean, the whole thing would collapse. It doesn't matter what other industries are taking place, in your local community and where you're located. Without the restaurants, that the amount of jobs they provide, not just to the employees, but also all of the services that go into sustaining that restaurant and the products that are going into to sustain those restaurants, economies collapse quick without restaurants. And it took a global pandemic for, really, truly not just the industry, but, governments to understand, like, okay, this is fragile, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of them. So seeing people selecting and choosing their local restaurant owner and operator is not just good for the industry, but it's good for your community when you sustain that and support it properly.
For years leading up to COVID, I would always just, with all my friends, family, I'd always talk about independent restaurants. And that was because I learned through doing the podcast, I'm like, guys, you have no idea how hard this is. And you have no idea how much these people care about their communities. I call restaurants like first responders.
Yeah, man.
The floods that hit the North Carolina mountains, the fires that hit LA, first responders are there, but who's also there? Restaurants, restaurant owners, local ones.
That's right.
Time, money, food, everything. They're feeding people. They're doing everything. People that own restaurants, independent restaurant owners, local group owners, they care deeply, deeply about their community. They care deeply about their employees. They care deeply about providing something for that community that makes it special, whether that's Waxhaw, North Carolina, or right here in, Charlotte City proper, center proper, whether it's Charleston, whether it's Fairhope, Alabama, whether it's Phoenix, Arizona, whether it's Boulder, Colorado. Big, small, and everything in between. You can't name a community that you say, this is a great community. Why is it great? You're not going to get through many reasons before you get to all the cool local restaurants and businesses, right? Like and so I would always advocate for independence leading up to COVID, and people be like, Will, you're just, you care too much. Well, then COVID happened, and all of a sudden everybody's like, I don't want my local restaurant to go away. Like, what do I do? Like, and they're supporting them like crazy. Like, they finally were getting some love back that they had been, and so people were more aware of that. That wears off over time, right? Like, but I do think that we're also in this interesting time where we're so surrounded with so much technology and our screens all the time. At least for my family of 5, we found that for us to really, truly connect, like even at the family dinner table now, we don't have our phones there, but you can just kind of tell mean, my kids are 22, 19, 16. They're like kind of rushing through the conversation. They want to go back to whatever. But when we go out to a restaurant, like some of our favorite local places, it's like that's where we're like really able to like have a true human connection and engagement. And if, again, it ain't about the food. I mean, the food's got to be all right, but it's not like we're going to go, it's just make the experience meaningful for us so that we can just enjoy life for a little while.
Yeah, we have a thing in our family. As soon as the girls got phones when they were like 16, I think they had to be 16 to get a phone. And we still do this to this day. We stack our phones in the middle of the table, and the person that touches their phone first pays for the meal. You know, and my daughter's listeners, they're smart, so they haven't ever paid for a meal, you know, so that those phones stay in the middle of the table. And it's been so great for us to, you know, still at this stage of life to get together and talk, you know, and chat. And we always have things to talk about. You know, I travel a lot for work, and I'll find myself, like last night, you recommended such a great restaurant, Hello Sailor.
Did you go there?
Oh my God. What an amazing place. And what an amazing experience that was. And I found myself wanting to pick up my phone, you know, but resisted and kept it on the table because the view, I mean, you're right on the water.
Yeah.
This beautiful restaurant. And, you know, so, and it's weird. You kind of feel like a weirdo psycho sitting there, not talking, not looking, not, you know, and you know, the ability to just leave your phone and enjoy. And because of that, I ended up having more conversations with the people that worked there. You know what I mean? They're stopping by. They didn't want to interrupt whatever I'm doing on my phone. Instead, they'd stop by and ask questions, where are you from? And so, you know, I agree. I think, you know, you're convincing me to ditch my smartphone and go with a flip phone because it's just too easy to get stuck in that and get locked in that, you know. And the, you know, all the people that are out there watching this, you know, most of you are in the restaurant industry, but you're also a consumer, you know, and how we dine is important. You know, we can learn a lot by observing what's going on in the restaurants. And I learned a lot last night, you know, like young people that were just doing a fantastic job at hospitality. You know, the food was great. It was outstanding. But the young people working there were just so friendly and so cool and so engaging and fun and funny. And I may have missed that if I was staring at my phone.
We have this generation that it's interesting because this generation that was raised on these things, and, you know, you hear, oh, they don't want to work. I think that generation's amazing.
I do too.
And quite frankly, God bless them, because, you know, we didn't get, I mean, like my kids didn't have a house phone. My daughter's first summer working at a restaurant, she was a hostess. She's like, she never really talked on the phone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yes.
But they've learned to navigate, you know, this stuff really, really well. Quite, I mean, sometimes better than maybe even we do as adults these days. But I'm impressed with this generation, and I'm excited to see how. And I will say that they are aware too.
Yes.
Like we're aware as adults. We're like, whoa, wait a minute. But these kids get it. They know. Like my kids are, you know, trying to learn to use their phone less because they inherently understand that there's just something about the addiction to this thing and how much it draws you in that's just not healthy.
Yes.
And it's really interesting because they all love these shows. What was the one, Stranger Things? They all have these shows about the 80s.
Yes.
And they're like, was the 80s really like that? I'm like, yeah, it was like that.
Yeah.
Like we're out on our bikes and nothing, you know, like
Yes.
There's just like natural human desire to not have this attachment to this technology, and they get it. Records are coming back, like people are listening. I love that. So it's like the pendulum swung really far, and I'm taking this to a point because you mentioned this earlier, and I always find this to be an interesting conversation, especially as an owner of a software business. But like finding in a restaurant the confluence of like technology and people.
Yeah.
And that balance, which I think is delicate and a little fragile, because if you overdo it with technology, you lose the humanity. If you underdo it with technology, like we were talking about earlier, like, should you really be spending 4 hours creating a schedule on Excel on a Sunday night, or should you be spending that time with your family? So like, just talk a little bit about, like, as an owner who's been through a time when there wasn't as much, you've been in this industry long, you've seen a lot of technology come in. Now there's a point of like, look, we had like a decade of basically free money, right? So a lot of venture capital's coming in, private equity's coming in, companies are popping up everywhere. I mean, there's just hundreds and hundreds. It's overwhelming to me how many restaurant tech companies there are.
Oh yeah.
There's tech fatigue. There's like, some owners are like, I don't want to hear about it because of his technology. I'm sick. Talk a little bit about that and like finding that right balance. And then we're adding in this thing called AI and how that all plays into this stuff. And how does that enable us to be more efficient, but then maybe, not take away from the humanity of all this?
Yeah, man. The balance between, automation and technology and hospitality is right now, in my opinion, is the trick. It's really, really important that we're utilizing technology, any opportunity that we can that helps us be better on the hospitality side and hospitality for the customers and hospitality for our employees as well. Thinking about the experience of the human beings with regards to, our restaurant operations. There is your company is a perfect example of, wasting that 4 hours on a Sunday night when you could be spending time with your children, or your friends, or doing something healthy, or going for a walk, or watching a movie with your wife. That is all better time spent for your life than sitting around messing with an Excel spreadsheet to schedule. And that's one example of a number of different systems and procedures within our restaurants that we can automate now, and I am a huge proponent of AI and the benefits that you can enjoy as a restaurant owner operator. We're very slow to adapt. I travel around the country and give speeches to large restaurant organizations around artificial intelligence. And when I ask at the beginning of my speech, how many of you are intentionally using AI to streamline your operation on a daily basis, it's less than 5% of the hands go up. And so, I encourage people, learn as much as you possibly can, start small, use simple hacks. I give, real examples of how you can utilize this, like today, to streamline your business. And when you do that well, and when you have a plan around it and it's intentional and you have, very specific goals and objectives for how you use technology and how it's going to benefit the business, it frees up more of your time to be in front of the guest and to be coaching and mentoring and training your staff, or just listening to your staff, making sure that you're carving out time when somebody is struggling so that you can have an 8-minute check-in with an employee to find out what's going on, make sure that they're okay. And if they need help, getting them the help that they need or the support that they need. You don't have time for that normally in restaurants unless you're successfully utilizing, technology and automation and AI. And so, it's a blessing for sure, but it can be a curse if you don't use it properly, and if you're just spending all your time in Claude, you know what I mean? That's not the purpose. The purpose is to, drive some automation and simplify your processes and streamline your processes so that you do have more time for the people part. I think that's the trick. And when people get good at that, and we've seen a lot of people since COVID get really good at that. When we get good at that, we enjoy so many benefits, the focusing on our people, certainly, but also, we just can't throw people at it like we used to in the 80s, for example. You just hire a bunch of people and throw people at it. You can't afford to do that now. So you have to automate as much as you possibly can, especially the things that are not, hospitality facing. You don't ever want to take away the human element there. That's so critical to the overall experience. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you can automate and you should be automating. And those are the things we should be focusing on with technology.
Why do you think it is that restaurants are a little slower just in general to adapt to technology? And I asked that when we got Schedulefly started in 2007, I was convinced. I was like, 10 years most. At most, everybody will have a scheduling. Like
yeah, for sure.
It just seems so obvious.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been 19 years. 30%, 35% of restaurants still don't, have a schedule. It's not having to be ours. It's just that they're doing something on paper or Excel. And some of that's because there's 5 employees and they don't like papers, sure, whatever. But there's still a lot that are spending a lot of time. I talk to them all the time. Like they're like, hey, I've been doing Excel for 20 years and it's just too much. That's true with a lot of different technology. Why is it the restaurants are slower to adapt? Is it a trust issue? Is it a
I think there's a couple things there, Will. I think part of it is that restaurant owners are so busy and they've got their head down. A lot of them are actually working in their restaurants instead of on their restaurant, and yep, they're so incredibly busy and the work is hard and it's hot and it's sweaty and it's dirty and messy. And then you get to the end of the day and the last thing you want to do is go research a bunch of scheduling software to find out which one is the right one, and it literally took a global pandemic to get operators to start utilizing technology. Prior to COVID, the consulting team that was working for me, we were constantly talking to everyone around onboarding 2 pieces of technology. Scheduling was one, and online ordering was the other one. We had a little bit of traction with scheduling. We got almost no traction with online ordering. People like to call. We like to answer, which, that's bullshit. Nobody wants to call. Nobody wants to answer. It's such an inefficient process. A lot of mistakes get made. It's not really great hospitality, trying to talk to somebody over the phone and take their order. But when the world shut down and they all started onboarding, online ordering technology, they realized immediately, hey, this is better for everybody. This is definitely better for us. It's a much more efficient process with fewer mistakes, and it doesn't require a human being that we have to pay, a very, very high minimum wage. And it's better for the guests. They get to kind of guide through the process of ordering and hand the app to the next person, and everybody gets to order instead of yelling into the phone. But it literally took the world shutting down for people to make that change, and part of it was they had a little free time.
Yeah, right.
And they had some time to actually investigate a little bit more and start diving into what are some solutions that can really help us. But now that we're back, we're seeing people. That process was helpful, I think, in getting them to understand that there are ways to streamline your operation. And then I think it maybe swung a little too far. There are a lot of restaurants that have over-engineered technology in the restaurant that they're paying for but not using. They use this much of something that does this. So that's another challenge now that I think, you guys serve really well in what you're doing, not just the people that are using a spreadsheet or a clipboard, but also the people that have some over-engineered software that they're just not using and never will. And you play a role in helping those people as well. The AI is very, very similar situation in that people, they're intimidated by it a little bit, or they've heard too much about it and they're freaking out, or they haven't heard enough about it, and so they're just not really sure what it means and what it is and how to utilize it. So, I'm going to encourage everybody that's listening to this to just get curious, start playing around in there and try out a couple of things. I didn't come here to sell a bunch of books, but I have another book coming out next month called Learn AI or Die. And it's a lot of businesses that were early adopters into AI and how, successful they're being and also not laying off people, by the way. They're just reallocating their talent and having their talent utilizing AI, and they're just exploding right now, and they have not laid off one person. So
I think there's a lot more of that than what we have been told will happen.
yes, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Especially in the restaurant space, right? It's not necessarily going to replace anybody. It's just going to make everybody better at their jobs and give them all more time to focus on the guest.
Talk about some of the AI tools that there's like voice AI coming out now. I mean, that seems to be the first thing. There'll be a lot of this stuff that will eventually, hopefully help a manager or a GM not having to be back in that office. Look, they're either back there during hours.
Yes.
When it would be better if they were checking food, training staff, talking to customers.
Yeah.
Or they're doing that during hours, and what happens after hours?
Correct.
Back in the office.
Yes.
3 more hours, getting home at 2 a.m.
Right.
No work-life balance.
Right.
No family life. Burned out. Gone.
Yeah.
Replacement. Expensive. Yeah. This should replace a lot of that stuff, right? To enable the hospitality. I mean, this hopefully should elevate hospitality maybe to a level that we haven't seen in quite some time by enabling people to be engaged with other people. Yeah.
I'll give you a fun example. So this is something that I've done when I've been traveling around and speaking, is I asked the attendees to my presentation, give me 5 ingredients that are in your walk-in right now that are going to go bad in the next 72 hours, right? And I just get 5 different ingredients, write them all down. Then I ask them for a celebrity chef, a recognizable name. I take that name and I write that name down. And then I open up Claude. I use Claude for, personal business. Open up Claude and I type in there, a prompt. You are. So in this example, they used Chef Gordon Ramsay was one of the names, and it was like fresh sausage, peaches, heavy cream, salmon, and some random vegetable. I can't remember what the vegetable was. And so I say, you are Chef Gordon Ramsay, and we've got, we want to make a special for the evening, and these are our ingredients, and you can use any other ingredients within, the walk-in to make this dish. But we want it to really have a Gordon Ramsay-inspired flair to it, right? And we asked for the recipe, we asked for back-of-house training, we asked for front-of-house training. It ended up giving us pairing with wines and cocktails and beers as well with this dish. We asked for some social media imagery, social media posts. We asked it to cost out this dish to give us a suggested price for the special that we're going to run. Like all of these things, and I do this live in front of a live audience, and all of these things take like 4 seconds and then another 4 seconds and then another 2 seconds to create something that generally we don't do at all. We wing it. It feels like $8.95. Let's go with it. No training front of the house, no training back of the house. It's just, hey, this is our special. And we were able to execute something really, really cool within, maybe in total 5 minutes. And it's complete and it's costed and it's thorough. Then we just for fun asked for another celebrity chef. And I wait until somebody says Anthony Bourdain because I'm a huge fan. And so I use him and say, okay, we're going to switch it up. Now you're Anthony Bourdain. Same ingredients, same concept. And that dish is very much Chef Bourdain as opposed to Chef Ramsay, and then we do a side-by-side to show people. And the reason I give that example to the people in the room is to showcase all of the things that we should be doing in our restaurant that we're not because we're too busy, that there's no excuse now. We have a tool that's available to help us do that. But also, when you want to get creative and you want to get inspired, this shouldn't replace your chef. This should help your chef and support your chef to facilitate not just the creativity in the dish, but also all of the supporting elements to that dish. That's just one kind of fun, free example. But, to your point, there are amazing tools out there. Vernica actually is a company that you turned me on to that we're now doing business with and supporting heavily. They do voice AI for restaurants where it'll take your order, take your reservation. And I was not a fan of any of that. I just did not think, I thought that was going to hurt hospitality. I'd rather they just order off the app. But but man, they do a good job. And it does feel very authentic. And even if you know it's AI, it's so thorough and so hospitable and so kind and so, it does the job better than a human being would. And it does feel real and authentic. And so there's so many really cool tools out there like that now that, for the people that do want to call, which there are a lot of people that do call, I call. Shocking how many times I call restaurants when I'm traveling. Are you open? Before I get in the car and drive there, I may have some questions, and I'm a pretty techie dude, but I'm surprised how many times I call and don't get an answer, or it's very, very loud. They can't hear me. I can't hear them. So yeah, you have to explore a little bit, but there are some great resources out there that can help restaurants.
Vernica, Virnika. Phenomenal people, great technology. My daughter had that job 2 summers ago. Could not stand answering the phone. And I will say, and this is true, y'all. This is a true story. I'm not trying to pimp Schedulefly here because I don't do that on this podcast, but I'm going to tell this story. Part of the reason that she quit that job, one was answering the phone, and I'll get to that with Vernica, but the other was because they had an Excel spreadsheet, and she would literally get an email on Sundays, and it would be a screenshot of an Excel spreadsheet on her iPhone. I'm like, well, how do you sync that with your account? She's like, I was like, well, how do y'all trade shifts? She goes, we have this text group, and it's a big mess. And she and a couple others were eventually like, this is ridiculous. I can't, this is so antiquated. And so that was a big part of why. But the other part was the answering the phone piece. Well, this isn't why she ended up quitting, but it was something that she was really frustrated with was you got a busy Friday night. This is a pizza place, right? Sit down, higher end pizzas, busy Friday night. And you're trying to be a hostess and seat people. The phone's ringing. You're answering the phone. It's loud. You can't hear what I'm sorry, could you please repeat that? People are getting frustrated. Didn't grow up with a house phone, so doesn't have great phone skills. It's not as natural. She's getting flustered. It's hard. That's where something that's a bad experience for the employee. That's a bad experience for the guest. That's a bad experience for the restaurant and their brand. That's where you might just have somebody just never mind, right? Vernica is going to make that situation a lot easier on everybody. The hostess or host doesn't have to worry about picking up the phone in the busy hours. They can focus on okay, these people came in, I'm going to seat you and have that great experience. Meanwhile, that phone, Vernica, or whatever tool you might use, is answering maybe multiple calls at one time, processing the orders, and doing a great job, and it's just happening behind the scenes. And of course, then people can still say, hey, I'd like to speak to a person or whatever, and there's typically that option. But that's a really good. I was very skeptical early on about but you know what? It does work, and what Cameron and Charles and Logan at the team of Vertical say, and I think they're right, is that people are moving back to you used to call, and now you have all these apps. But this is a lot more, especially if you're driving. You don't need to be doing this. And the next generation is growing up talking to their phone, voice texting, talking to their watch, and we're getting back to talking. So imagine you're driving, and hey, let me just call the pizza place, just go ahead and call this pizza place, whatever. Here's the order I'd like to, done. And then you pick it up. Versus I'm driving and let me pull up the app or let me call and I can't get, I can't hear somebody. I mean, that's so, cause you ask, some people think voice AI is irrelevant because everything's who uses the phone anymore.
Right.
But with this technology on our phones now, you're actually using the phone in a different way. It's just that you're just telling it, this is what I want, and it's communicating with an AI, and then boom, it's done. And you're not having to type, you're not having to scroll, you're not having to punch, you're not having to look, whatever.
Yeah, man, it's very human and hospitable.
Yeah.
The way that it's designed. And it brings up this whole other element of the restaurant industry, which is really hard, is training people how to talk on the phone. To your point, kids don't
know how to do that.
They
do not know how to do that now.
And it's a skill.
Yeah.
They text now, or they talk text and then receive a talk text back. And that's just, trying to train somebody to do that really, really well. And all of the things that we would prefer they do, and we ask them to do, and we train them to do, but they don't, to upsell, to make sure that we're getting the order right. We're asking all of the questions that are necessary to fulfill that order that don't get asked. And once they hang up, do I call them back and ask them how they want their steak cooked? I forgot, that all of that goes away because, Veronica's nailed that down. I love that. And there's a couple of other AI tools that I really love that are developed by restaurant people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I bump into technology all the time that you can tell, brilliant people created this technology, but they're not restaurant people, and you can tell right away. It's missing that whole hospitality piece. And there's a lot of companies that are doing it really well, and Vernica is one of them. I'm a huge fan.
There is an interesting dynamic between the tech that's developed by restaurant people to solve their own problem versus the tech that is developed by people that think this is how restaurants should do things.
Yes.
And they're really smart, and they got funding, and they didn't work in restaurants. The people that funded them didn't work. And to all them, very smart people, this sounds, of course restaurants should do it this way.
Right.
Yeah, but you don't really know how restaurants actually work and operate and actually think.
That's right.
Nicholas Wicks, check this out. Him.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. What a great...
Huge fan.
Dude who solved his own problem, and now check this out. Check this out.io. You also, it's a text messaging platform. Check it out. We love Nicholas. But, well, I want to talk about something it's a challenging subject, which is, and I got a lot of this content from you, which is independent restaurants are struggling right now.
Oh yeah.
There are reports that indicate that, upwards of 9-10% of them could close this year. And that's that. And when you hear that, you're like, okay, well, that's not normal. That's 2 to 3 times the normal rate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Talk about that. Some of that's going to be unavoidable. Some of that's just economic factors that, people are, not able to afford to go out as much. So you have inflation, you have GLP-1s, you got lower alcohol sales. That's your high margins. Talk about that, and then talk about what we can do to try to mitigate that.
Yeah, so I saw a stat, 2025, 42% of all restaurants either broke even or lost money. Like, that's a crisis. Like, alarm bells should be going off. In Seattle, Washington, it was 81%.
Either broke even or lost money.
Right? So, like, and nobody's talking about it. And again, to my earlier point, that how critically important restaurants are to a community. We should be doing something about this, and we're not. There's very, very little support going on. I think if I could give restaurant owner and operators out there some advice, some of it's going to feel probably obvious, some of it's not going to feel so obvious. But, in the restaurants that I'm still a partner, we have a 3-legged stool where we prioritize, our goals and objectives. And it's focus on the employee experience, focus on the guest experience, and focus on the bottom line in that order. And when you do that, first of all, it's way harder to do than it is to say, to focus on employees that way while you're still holding them accountable, holding them at a very, very high standard, all of those things, but also making sure that you're focusing on your people and caring for them and making sure that you have a really great work environment. Man, that has never been more important than right now because we cannot afford to turn employees over. It's so expensive. Somewhere between $4,500 and $6,000 per employee to turn them over and to get them up to the level of an employee that had been established. For managers, it's like $12,000 to $15,000 to turn them over. Like, that's real money.
Do you think most people know that?
I don't think
most restaurant owners know that that's how expensive that is.
And I think they think, well, it didn't work out. They leave. Let's grab a stack of, applications, just call the first person on the top, the first person that comes with a, a haircut in a heartbeat. Let's hire them, and it's way too expensive. It's way too costly. It's better to invest in them up front and not have them turning over because we can't afford it. Like that alone will change the financial dynamic in a restaurant. Like just that. If you did nothing else, that would be the number one thing I would recommend. And then number two is, like have a model of consistent improvement within your restaurant. This will help with your retention too, by the way. Statistics show that the more you train employees, the longer they stay. They feel like they can trust the environment. They can trust their coworker because they're well trained as well. The people, you hear people in the military all the time say like it's not about the opponent or the enemy on the other side. It's about the person to the left of me and the person to the right of me. And that's how I survive. And that's how we get through this, together, because we have to have one another. And in the restaurant environment, if everybody is very well trained, there's kind of a trust and a faith and a comfort that goes into showing up to work every day where it's like, oh, I'm working with Jeff again, and Jeff sucks, and Jeff doesn't work, and Jeff's lame, and he's lazy, and they let him stay here. He hasn't been trained. That's stressful, and people leave for things like that. And then, finally, and, we've talked a little bit about this today, like if you need help, get help. Like there's so many resources, books you can read certainly, but resources online, YouTube videos of people that will train you how to create a P&L, how to manage a P&L. There's technology that will automate all of that for you, and let you know what you need to do. And then, finally lean in to AI. There are so many benefits to utilizing that technology. We have not seen anything like this in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
The internet was so incredibly foundational to, what the world has become today and how it changed business and industry. Certainly restaurants benefited from that heavily. The invention and adoption of the smartphone has changed lives. We couldn't even imagine how much that was going to impact the world. It makes both of those look like, a square wheel. The power of AI cannot be overstated. And again, most restaurants aren't utilizing it, but if they do, they're going to be able to enhance all of the things in their restaurant, streamline operations, streamline their finances, find ways to make more money, find opportunities to increase the revenue and bring more of that to the bottom line. We could spend hours talking about that, but I really truly believe that that's a game changer for the restaurant owners and operators that are going to adopt that today are the ones that are going to survive and thrive within the next couple of years. And those who don't, they're going to suffer. It's going to catch up.
One piece of that I want to talk about is training. I want to talk about more than one piece, but the training part in an independent restaurant. There's companies that, that do training for big chains and large groups and things like that. If you've got 1, 2, 3 locations, how do you train effectively?
Yeah, there are a couple of really cool companies out there. Expandshare is one of the companies that we've used in the past, where you can videotape all your training, so that when Lance gets hired into the restaurant, he's watching a video that Will had created around food safety or knife safety or how to greet a guest or whatever. And Will was our champion at that, whatever that skill was. And so every employee that now works for the restaurant that comes in gets to see Will give that same exact consistent message every time. And the old school way was I get hired and I am told to follow Will around. And depending on the night that Will had the night before or the morning that Will has had today or whatever's going on in Will's life, right now, I'm going to get that training experience that has very little to do with Will at his core, but I'm experiencing Will in the moment, right? And it's not necessarily always going to be a great thing. Whereas Will normally is spectacular, right? And so capturing Will at his best on video, like that's such an easy hack. You don't even need really a tool for that. It's so easy to pull all that together now. But some tools like Expanshare, I'll give you the opportunity to also have testing along with that, and you can track all of it, and you can see where I am in my training journey, things like that. But I think video training is so easy. You can do it with your phone. You don't need the best lighting or the best sound anymore, the best camera. Your smart device can do that for you. But yeah, I think training as well. The other part of it is, the owner can tell their story. This is why we started this restaurant, and this is why it exists and why we've been here so long. And every employee gets that as a part of their orientation, whereas a busy owner doesn't always have time to do that. And so that might get missed.
I cannot emphasize enough how valuable I think it is for every restaurant owner to tell their story to their team and to their guests.
Yes.
Stories connect us.
They do.
When I go to a website for a restaurant and there's no story, there might be an about. It's like, hey, we serve great food. God, it is like the easiest thing you can do to create an emotional connection with your employees and with your guests. And if your employees understand more than just this guy or this gal's the owner and, this is their place and they want me to work hard, but like, this is why this place exists. It matters.
Yeah.
It matters to them. They become part of the story. They want to share that story. The guests want to be part of that story. They want to share that story. I like telling stories, obviously.
Yeah.
700 podcast episodes. I like sharing stories. But you know what? From when you're a little kid, mommy, daddy, tell me a story. We like stories.
Yeah.
We want to know stories. We like to hear stories. And stories are what give us this connection to something that's sometimes not there when we don't know. And I mean, we had this. It was actually the guys at Vernica and I were at Top of the Hill Restaurant and Brewery about a month ago. And Scott Maitland, the owner, was with us. And there's a beer there called Ellie's Bitter. He's like, do you want to hear the story about this beer? And the story had to do with literally Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, not shutting down the entire Civil War. I'm going to try to give you the abbreviated version.
Wow.
The Union, the Confederate battle lines are like right there in the town around the university. The Union is coming down, and there's going to be this basically a big battle there, and the whole university is probably going to just get wiped out. And so the president of the university convinces the Southern general to move his battle lines further east. But the Union general comes and realizes, okay, they're not here, but the president goes and greets him, and he brings him in, and he like sits him down for tea, and he's like, hey, I've got some like Revolutionary War maps. I've got General Cornwallis's maps here. Would you like to see these? And the Union general was like, holy crap, that's really cool. So the freaking president of the university brings his daughter along, and her name's Ellie. And Ellie and the Union general hit it off. And they strike up a relationship. And the Civil War ends soon after. They get married.
Wow.
And the freaking General Assembly of North Carolina is so pissed off about that even though Chapel Hill was open during the entire Civil War, they shut it down for 4 years because they were bitter about Ellie marrying a Union general.
You have got to be kidding me.
Now, do you want to drink that beer after you hear that story?
100%, for
Freaking
sure. Let's go
story
right now.
I would have not ordered that. I don't even like bitter, but I'm like, give me one.
So good.
The power of the story.
Yes, indeed.
The power of the story. I just thought that was so cool. But tell your story, tell your team, tell your employees, tell your managers, tell your guests, get your story out there, because you may be humble about it, but people care. People want to know, like, why? What's the why behind all this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. We all want to be connected to something, right?
Absolutely. We want to be a part of that story. And that is what you can do. And this is another thing Scott Maitland told me years ago. He's one of the first people that ever came on this podcast. And I thought it was such an important point, because he was talking about independent restaurants and how hard it is to compete against a well-funded, scaled chain. But he said the chain's Achilles heel is local, intimate knowledge.
Yeah.
And when you are an independent restaurant owner, you have that local, intimate knowledge, and you're connected to the community. And he told me at the time, he said, I'm not in the restaurant business. I am in the Chapel Hill business. I'm here to service and support Chapel Hill.
That's good.
The restaurant is my tool for doing that. But if you own an independent restaurant, lean into that, because you have something so unique that no chain can ever replicate.
Yes. And when you do, everything else works itself out.
That's right.
Everything else will work itself out.
Yeah. Challenges ahead, opportunities ahead. Restaurants have been around forever. Restaurants will be around forever. Unfortunately, some restaurants fail, but the industry as a whole collectively always gets better and better. COVID was tough. Some didn't make it, but the restaurant industry got better because it adapted technology. So those reports are hard, but there are opportunities to be successful, which you've articulated.
I believe that. I do believe that. And I'm optimistic for the people that, are going to engage and do the right things the right way. I'm optimistic that there's a lot of opportunity for them moving forward, for sure.
What no prediction can ever nail is how creative and resilient restaurant owners generally are. So sure, some percent might be set to fail, but you just can't. It's impossible to imagine how creative and thoughtful and resilient and iterative restaurant owners are, and how they adapt. They always have, and they always will.
Restaurant owners don't get into this business for the same reason other business owners get into those businesses generally. It is this irrational love of food and people that, they get into it, and then within that environment, you create your tribe, and you find your tribe, and together you start figuring things out. It's very unique. It's very unique. Other businesses, you have key employees that may, help you and inspire you along the way. For sure, all great companies have that, no doubt about it. But in the restaurant industry, it's really, truly, in the trenches together. Hot, fast-paced, smelly, greasy, wet, it's just a very, very weird business in general relative to other businesses. And it's in those moments that you forge really potent, powerful relationships. And so I agree with you. I think that restaurant owners have that, but I also believe that restaurant owners have that because of that tribe that is with them, of very like-minded people that came up in the industry, and they may not own a restaurant or yet, but they still have that very similar drive and passion and mentality around it. And so, together, we can overcome a lot. I've learned so much from the employees that worked for me. And people that were honest with me and held up a mirror, and kind of called out my faults because they'd been in the industry for so long. They're like, yeah, man, that's not going to work, Lance. You can't do that way. You can't treat people that way. You can't, we have to be better, and so, through that you learn, and, you get burned a couple times, and then you get up and brush yourself off and get back into it, and people are loving and forgiving, and they're like, all right, let's rock, Very unique. It's such a cool business. I'm so grateful that, I ended up in this business. Thank you, Joan.
I was literally, you just said rock, and I was just about to say, she's still rocking, isn't she?
Oh yeah, she's still rocking. She's on tour right now, actually.
It's amazing.
If you haven't seen her live, still to this day, I have no idea how old she is. She's got to be, deep into her 60s, and she just still crushes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's pretty inspiring.
Is there anything else we should talk about? Is there anything we've missed?
Man,
it's a wide-ranging conversation.
This has been so great. I honestly want to, tell you, but I want everybody else to hear this. You and I were introduced by, I believe, Cameron.
By Cameron.
From Vernica.
Yeah.
He is the one that introduced us, and he told me on a call, he said, you need to meet my friend Will. He's a great guy. You guys are going to hit it off. And it's like, great. I had no idea who you were. I knew who Schedulefly was, but they didn't connect those dots for me. And we did. We hit it off right away. And you and I have developed a friendship and a relationship through just talking and calling one another very like, hey, man, I want to bounce something off of you, and have developed a faith and a trust. And like, it says so much about why Schedulefly is so successful, because, your commitment to, like, you have a reputation for your customer service and how people are treated when they become a part of the Schedulefly family. And I have felt that personally. And, so I wanted to make sure that I said that, like, you're the real deal, dude. And you are such an authentic, genuine human being. And I'm grateful for your friendship, and I'm grateful for the advice and guidance that you provide for me. And, looking forward to what the coming years is going to provide for us. But, just very, very grateful for you.
Dude, well,
appreciate you.
Ditto. Likewise. It's nice to meet somebody who I've only known for 2 months, and I've shared more with you, in the last few conversations, personal stuff and things that like barely anybody knows. So it's nice to find a kindred spirit. So Cameron, I know you're watching, listening. Thank you very much. What a wonderful, that dude is a good connector. He knows, and he's a great guy. So Vernica, for y'all listening, watching, VIRNIKA, Vernica, is it Vernica.io? VIRNIKA, AI-enabled, badass technology, backed by really great people. And don't forget, that's such a huge part of it.
Restaurant people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any restaurant tech, there's the tech and there's the people that are behind it. Try to find a marriage of both those. And there are companies out there like that. And they're one of them. So, dude, this is awesome.
You're a gem.
Likewise, man.
Appreciate
Thank
you very much.
Absolutely. One more time, the books. So we can just go to LanceReynolds.com.
LanceReynolds.com, and I have them all listed there.
All listed there. So you got another one coming out.
Got another one coming out.
Dude, you're like a legit author now.
Yeah, man. I never expected this to be a thing, but I enjoy it, and I've learned through the process I've got something to say that people give a shit about. And so I'm going to just keep sharing until they stop giving a shit.
Do you have social media pages for these things, or do you just?
I do. So foodbiztoday.ai is the company that I'm pushing right now, and then Lance Reynolds-ish is my Instagram. You can find me there, Lance Reynolds-ish.
Lance Reynolds-ish. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you talk about your books, or do you just personal stuff, or everything?
I do. It's pretty random. I've been filming a lot, just kind of filming, my life and the things that I think are important to help people become successful in as fun a way as I possibly can without being preachy, to help as many people as I can.
Well, you know about this, so we'll close with this, because I'm going to go ahead and talk about this on this episode here, which is I've written what's called a treatment, which I didn't know what that was, but I learned it through Claude. But y'all, we have done almost 700 episodes of this podcast. We have some amazing, amazing stories that we've told of independent restaurant owners. Not famous restaurant owners, Michelin award winning, James Beard, they're all great, and I know a lot of them too. I'm talking about like Scott Maitland at Chapel of the Hill, or Chick Evans up in Chicago, or Tammy Henderson down in Defuniak Springs, Florida, who just own restaurants. But they are amazing people with amazing stories, with amazing passion for their communities, and they all have followed sort of like the hero's arc, which is, somebody who wants something and has to overcome some obstacle to get it. So we are in the process of learning our way through creating either a documentary or a docuseries sharing the stories of these independent restaurant owners. And it's funny because I talked to Chick Evans. So Chick, I hope you're listening to this. I love what he said is I said, well, why do you do what you do? You own independent restaurants. It's challenging. He goes, man, I'm just trying to keep it real in a world that is becoming really unreal, Will. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, everything's becoming homogenized, and I don't want everything to be homogenized, so I'm going to keep doing this. And I think that's a great way to look at independent restaurants. But you know about this, so I'm just letting people know it's called The Independents, and it's sort of like Chef's Table meets Main Street. And I'm not going to say who the big name that's affiliated with this or attached, because I'm not sure if I should say that yet, but a very well-known chef celebrity, Lance knows, has attached himself as executive producer. So hopefully you'll see this one day. So there's our announcement for that. All right, man.
Another great adventure coming your way, brother. I'm excited for you.
Absolutely. That's a wrap. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Lance. More episodes coming soon. Please, 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 if you are on YouTube watching, give it a thumbs up, subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcast, if you're on Spotify, give us a 5-star rating. Make sure to subscribe, because those ratings and subscriptions get this freaking awesome content out in front of even more people. Thank you all. See you next time.